What's up everybody, it's your boy Squints here, and with season 4 underway, I'm going to teach you everything you need to know to time your keys in the Azure Vault. If you're looking for a route to complete this dungeon, you can find it in the description below. And now, let's head into the first trash you'll encounter. Starting off with the Shrieking Whelp, you're going to see these throughout the beginning portion of the dungeon. They can see through stealth and also cast Shriek, which will cause all nearby enemies to come and aid the whelpling and awaken any mobs that are stoned. These whelps have a very small aggro range though, and it's displayed as a ring around the character. Next up is the Conjured Lasher, and their Mystic Vapor's ability applies a dot that deals a ton of damage, so make sure that you interrupt it. Next up, let's talk about the Arcane Tender, or the little tree ants roaming around. Their ability, Wild Eruption, is going to send little arcane missiles all around the room that are displayed as arcane swirlies, so make sure you don't stand in those. And these will leave low arcane pools on the ground, and you don't want to stand in those either. Erratic Growth is an ability that you have to interrupt. Otherwise, it's going to turn the target into a sprout and stunning them for 6 seconds. When the stun drops, it'll transform all nearby players into sprouts, also stunning them. So you can see why this is a must interrupt ability. And when it comes to the Tenders and the Lashers, they can all be stunned, disoriented, rooted, and silenced. So make sure that you use your AoE stuns here, knockups, anything to kind of interrupt all these casts. But the main thing you want to make sure you interrupt is that Erratic Growth, because things get weird when things get a little erratic, you know what I mean? And speaking of hard things, we have the Crystal Fury up next. And you're going to want to make sure that you hard CC his Piercing Shards cast, which is a frontal cone that deals a shit ton of damage. This ability in this season is also now telegraphed, so there's a visual for you to see exactly where the shards are being shot. But this ability is going to shred your tank, so make sure that you use a hard CC like a disorient or a stun to prevent it from going off. And when it comes to long, tall, and slim, you got the Crystal Thrasher. With Splintering Shards, they're going to target a random player and deal arcane damage to them for 6 seconds. But the ability you want to look out for is Crystal Line Rupture. This is going to be a giant AoE swirly that is around the mob that you're going to want to make sure you run out of. Otherwise, it's going to deal big damage to you, and you ain't gonna want none of that. And now it's all about the ooze factor when it comes to the Volatile Sapling. These little suckers explode on death. It's displayed as an arcane swirly. Get the hell out of it. That's all I gotta say. Now it's time for the first boss, Leymor. His first ability, Leyline Sprouts, is he's going to create trees all around the room, and if you stand near them, you're going to take arcane damage. Next up is Erupting Fissure. This is a frontal cone that's aimed at the tank, and it's going to deal big damage to them and knock them back. A key thing to know about this ability, as a tank, you can use this ability to destroy some of the trees, which is very important, and I'll explain why in just a moment. So as anyone that's not the tank, if you see him rotating the boss to line up this ability to smack and destroy some trees, just get the hell out of the way. And as a tank, pop a defensive so you don't take too much damage. Next up is Explosive Brand, and Leymor is going to slam the ground, dealing group damage. So healers, make sure you're ready to just top off your party after this. This is also going to apply a debuff to everybody in the party that's going to put a big giant arcane ring around your character model. After 6 seconds, this is going to explode, destroying all trees within the ring, so make sure that you guys aren't overlapping the rings and you're all trying to destroy as many trees as possible. You want to clear out every single tree, ideally with this ability and Erupting Fissure. And anytime trees are destroyed during this fight, you are going to spawn little volatile saplings that the tank is going to have to aggro, and the DPS are going to have to cleave down. Don't forget, these explode on death, displayed as an arcane swirly, so make sure you don't stand in them. Next up is Consuming Stomp. It's going to deal AoE damage to the entire party, so make sure you pop a defensive, and healers, make sure you're prepped to heal up your party. Now this ability's damage is increased for every tree that is up during the cast, and that's why it's so important that you're clearing out trees efficiently throughout the entire fight, because on higher keys, a tree or two can absolutely one-shot some of your party members, so I cannot emphasize how important tree management is throughout this fight. And last up is Infused Strike for our tanks. It's gonna hit you and deal some big damage and apply a dot that deals arcane damage every 10 seconds, so make sure you pop a defensive. Now, making our way downtown through the vault, we're gonna run into more Crystal Furies and Thrashers. I'm not going over those because we already did, so make sure you took mental notes that you're gonna see more of these mobs throughout the rest of the dungeon. But what we will cover are the arcane elementals. You're going to want to make sure that you interrupt Waking Bane because it puts the target to sleep, and there ain't no time for sleeping when you're in the Azure Vault, alright? Next up is Unstable Curator, and you're going to want to look out for the Forbidden Knowledge cast. This is not interruptible, and it's going to spawn arcane swirlies all over the ground that deal massive damage that you're not going to want to get hit by. And the one thing that's probably going to get you hit by them if you're not paying attention is the Runesteel Keeper. And with this guy, you're going to want to make sure you interrupt Icy Bindings because it roots all enemies for 5 seconds, and these mobs try to wombo combo together to make sure that they can kill you. And the Azure Vault is very arcane themed, so it's on theme to make sure that we have an arcane construct that you're going to have to deal with. They're going to do Arcane Bash, which is a frontal cone. Make sure you're not standing in the way or getting hit by it. And they'll also cast Conjure Barrier, which is an absorb shield that you can purge off the target. You will also end up dealing with some Astral Attendants that will cast Unstable Power that's going to fire arcane missiles at all players in melee. This is a low prio ability when it comes to interrupts, depending on the mobs you have, but if you can, interrupt it, and of course, stun, disorient, AoE, any hard CC is always great to use as a main source of interrupting, so you can also interrupt minor abilities like this guy's. Now, when you're done going through those rings, you're gonna end up coming up towards the second boss here, and in that room, you're going to fight Vault Guards. These are very tanky boys, and they deal increased damage and reduce magic damage taken, so just be aware they're extra tank. And a mini boss you're going to encounter is the Scalebane Lieutenant. He's going to deal frost damage, and you're going to want to make sure you move out of his frontal, spell Frost Breath. Going to deal big damage, and if you ain't the tank, you're gonna get spanked. And now it's time for the second boss, Azureblade. The name's more edgy than the fight actually is. Throughout the fight, he's going to spawn draconic images. These are illusions that are going to cast Illusionary Bolt that deals big freaking damage to a random player. You have to make sure you interrupt this ability because the damage on it is insane. As soon as this mob comes out, all the damage are going to want to hop on it and burn it down as quickly as possible and interrupt, of course, Illusionary Bolt. The boss is going to do a cleave called Arcane Cleave. It has a short cast time, but it's going to cleave out in front of the boss, dealing damage to anyone in front of the boss. This is a tank mechanic, so make sure you use it defensive and that you're not aiming this ability at your party. And if you're melee or anybody, just make sure you're never standing in front of the boss. This boss's third ability is Ancient Orb. It's going to create a massive arcane orb, and he's going to shoot it out in a direction. Make sure you don't get hit by it because it deals big damage. Now, throughout the fight, the boss is going to use Overwhelming Energy, where he'll move to the center of the room and become immune. In order to remove the boss's immunity, you're going to have to kill all the draconic illusions that have spawned around the room. It's important to try and group everybody up on one draconic image and move around the boss clockwise, killing all the images. Because throughout this phase, the boss is going to be dealing AoE damage and shooting out arcane org fragments that everybody's going to have to dodge, and they deal a ton of damage. So make sure you're focusing on dodging them because they will go straight through those mobs that you're fighting. So melee, really keep a close eye on those orbs. Healers, make sure you're paying attention to everybody's health bars during this phase to keep everybody topped off. And once all the illusions are dead, the fight is rinse and repeat. Now, if you played during the last season, Azure Vault was part of the Mythic Plus rotation, you will remember a super fun skip that we had after the second boss. And I am sad to inform you that that no longer exists. So you're gonna have to head down and fight some frog boys. Starting with the Null Magic Horn Swag, that's a mouthful. They're going to use Null Stomp, which will make the mob leap to a location, dealing damage, and this is displayed as a big brown swirly on the ground. Now, when it comes to these mobs, you're going to want to try and group them up, stun, and root them, and as a group, try to stay loosely stacked just so the mob isn't leaping all the way across the room. Next up, you're going to want to look out for the Dracnoid Breaker. Their Bestial Roar is going to deal damage to everybody in the party, and then with Shoulder Slam, they're going to charge a target and deal some damage. The knockback has been removed from this ability, but it will increase the physical damage that you take by 10% for the next 12 seconds. And this is displayed as a little brown ring around your character with a red arrow above you, so make sure that you're not standing next to someone, or if you see that person, that you're not standing within their ring. Next up, you have Terrasect Delver, and they're going to tear flesh and deal damage and apply a bleed for 10 seconds. When fighting all this trash, AoE CC is your best friend because it can become challenging to cleave down the frogs and everything at once, with the frogs just slowly leaping all over the room. Now, on to the third boss. We have Telash Greywing. Their first ability, Frost Bomb, is going to mark all players in the party with a frost ring around them. After 5 seconds, it's going to detonate, dealing damage to everybody and and having them leave behind a damaging slowing pool for 2.5 minutes. A big part of this fight is proper pool placement. You're going to want to make sure that you're dropping this on the outside of the rings. Next up is Icy Devastator. The boss is going to target a player, shoot a beam of frost at them, dealing damage to them and all players within 8 yards of the target. Now for melee, if you can move out of melees to reduce the damage that everybody in melee is going to take, that would be ideal. And as a range player, you guys are just going to want to stay loosely spread, or chocolate sprinkles, or whatever the hell you called it in elementary school when you had to put out your arms and swing them side to side and move away from each other, just so when a range player is targeted that you're not dealing unnecessary damage to your melee players or other range players. And the last ability in this fight is Absolute Zero. The boss will teleport to the center of the ring and start casting an ability that when the cast is done, it's going to deal massive damage to literally everybody. And you deal with this damage by going to one of 3 vault runes that are placed around the ring. And these vault runes, you are basically going to be pulling the boss towards every single one before this Absolute Zero ability goes off. So when you see the boss teleport to the center of the rune, stop what you're doing and run to the vault rune and stay in there until the ability goes off. Use the defensive if you want to be a nice guy and reduce the damage even further for your healer. And healers, just be ready to heal and top your party off because it is only a 50% damage reduction. And that's it. This boss only has 3 simple mechanics that you have to deal with, and it is rinse and repeat until the boss is dead. And the best part is there's no trash from the 3rd boss to the final boss. So let's dive right into it. The boss's first ability is Brittle. At 75% health, 50% health, and 25% HP, the boss is going to drop giant shards nearby that your damage are going to have to hop on and destroy as quickly as possible. Because after 15 seconds, they explode and deal down a ton of damage. And every single time one of these shards are going to have a huge absorb shield on it, so try to focus that one down and cleave down the rest of the shards. This boss has also been updated since the last time you've probably done Azure Vault, and the shards now drop nearby the boss, so there's no reason to jam your tank into a corner or do some weird mechanic to make the shards drop nearby. They will just now do that. Arcane Eruption, where the boss is going to summon giant arcane orbs that move around the room and deal big damage. These also deal damage when they spawn and will be displayed as, once again, an arcane swirly. The boss is also going to do Unleash Destruction that's going to knock players back and deal damage to them. The boss is also going to do Crystalline Roar, which is a giant frontal cone that deals big time damage, so make sure that you don't get hit by that. And for our tanks, the boss is also going to do Dragon Strike that's going to deal big damage and apply a dot that deals moderate damage over 10 seconds. So make sure you pop a defensive. And healers, this is a magic debuff, so make sure you remove it if you can. And with that, that's all the mechanics you need to know about the final boss. It's rinse and repeat, and the one thing that's going to kill you is if your DPS do not stop attacking the boss and kill the damn crystals, because at higher keys, those crystals are absolutely going to one-shot your group, so don't F around with them. Just kill them. Literally, that's all you gotta do. Thanks so much for watching, and if you want to check out and see me run Azure Vault live on Twitch, YouTube, or Kick, make sure you join our Discord in the description below to get notifications for any time that I go live, or you can follow me on X. Our Discord is a growing community where we share Mythic Plus tips, class tips, and anything World of Warcraft related and more, so make sure you come hang out with us. And with all that, make sure that you punch that like button, kiss that subscribe button, and tickle my bell for me so you can stay up to date with all the other Mythic Plus guides that I have coming out on the channel. And with that, I'll see you guys next time.